And there we go. There I am. Hello, welcome to Left on Left. I am the producer, engineer, Jayme CheeseSlice. And today we have Gloria Guillo and Jayme Kuzmarov joining us. We're going to be talking about the assassination of Martin Luther King and a lot of the interesting things that have happened around that event. So without further ado, let's bring on Gloria. Hello, and
Hey,
Jayme.
Jayme.
How are you guys doing? So we got
Good.
two segments to record today. And these will be for WBAI and Pacifica Radio Networks. And you guys it's going to be two segments about the same subject. And you guys have figured out how you're going to divide them into two different subjects around the same topic. So I'm interested to hear what you're going to say. Let's get started. Gloria, I got to just set up my phone, or I got to set up my stopwatch, and then we'll be ready to go. Should have had that ready. But hope you guys are doing all right. And I'm ready to go. I'm going to cut out. Gloria, you can start the show whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Left on Left, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. I'm Gloria Guillo, former administrator for New York City government, an investigative journalist, vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, a group so left it's right on. I'm joined here today by a resident expert, Jayme Kuzmarov. Jayme is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are our own and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. And we've added a disclaimer. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional advice. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and form their own opinions. This presentation is not intended to incite, promote, or encourage any discriminatory or illegal activity. Our topic today is, did Edgar Hoover coordinate the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? And was James Earl Ray a patsy? Now, before we get into this, in memory of Dr. Martin Luther King, whose birthday was yesterday, January 15th, and I'd like to speak a little bit here. So before we get into Hoover, let's honor Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. by reciting excerpts from a speech he gave at the Riverside Church on April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year before he was assassinated. While the Reverend King speaks on Vietnam, his words easily apply to Ukraine, Gaza, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this is from Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence. A time comes when silence is betrayal. That time has come for us in relation to Vietnam. I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, for the sake of the government, for the sake of hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent. Beyond the calling of race or nation or creed is the vocation of sonship and brotherhood. And because I believe the Father is deeply concerned, especially for the suffering and helpless and outcast children, I come tonight to speak for them. This I believe to be the privilege and the burden of all of us who deem ourselves bound by allegiances and loyalties which are broader and deeper than nationalism and which go beyond our nation's self-defined goals and positions. We are called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for the victims of our nation, and for those it calls enemy. For no document from human hands can make these humans any less our brothers. We have destroyed their two most cherished institutions, the family and the village. We have destroyed their land and their crops. We have corrupted their women and children and killed their men. What liberators. Thank you. Jayme, please discuss your two amazing articles, and if we could bring them up. I'm not sure which order you want to go in. We have J. Edgar Hoover, coordinated assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and James Earl Ray was the Patsy, and that's by you, Jayme Kuzmarov, and it was written and published on September 23rd, 2024. And then there's another article that you had written, Did J. Edgar Hoover order the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.? And that was on January 17th, 2022.
Well, first, if I can say
Wait,
something.
I just want to say one thing. Your opening quote, I loved it. It's from the Black Radical Stokely Carmichael. Are you ready to read it, or should I read it?
Oh, go ahead. I was actually going to read that quote. Which
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
You say, if you have it directly, you read it.
Okay. This is what kind of got me going, Jayme. You inspired me. The man. This is from Black Radical Stokely Carmichael. The man don't care. You call ghettos concentration camps, but when you tell him his war machine is nothing but hired killers, you got trouble. Take it away, Jayme.
Well, that's about said it all. Yeah, Stokely whispered that in Martin's ear after that Riverside speech, and the rest is history. Within 1 year, King was assassinated, and the official story, that James Earl Ray, this white supremacist, killed King, but that story has been thoroughly debunked. And actually, the leading figure was the King family lawyer who recently passed away, William Pepper. He was an amazing lawyer. And in fact, there's a new documentary by John Barber that was screened at the Whistleblower Conference that we were at in Washington this past summer. And John Barber is a Canadian actor who made this film. And he said that Pepper should be considered among the greatest lawyers in American history, with Jim Garrison and maybe Abraham Lincoln. And Pepper for years just did amazing research, tracked down all kinds of witnesses, and you really exposed that it was a lie that James Earl Ray was the lone assassin. In fact, it was physically impossible. Because Ray would have had to been. Firstly, Ray was not a good shot. It has a lot of similarities, excuse me, with the JFK assassination. If you look into it, Lee Harvey Oswald was not a good shot. It was impossible for him to shot Kennedy from the 6'4", Texas School Book Depository. In the Ray case, studies found that he would have to actually be hanging out the window, because allegedly he shot him from this rooming house. King was at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, and the rooming house was actually at a fair distance where Ray allegedly shot him. So it'd take like a real professional sniper. And then based on the angle, experts like Pepper and his team found that Ray would have to been somehow hanging out the window and towards the slide, and could have only gripped the rifle with one hand, leaning out of the window, and somehow struck him. And actually, there was foliage that made that virtually impossible. But the investigation found that the real shots came from a grassy area, the equivalent of the grassy knoll in the JFK assassination. And those were the real assassins. And one person Pepper got in touch with was a guy named Lloyd Jowers, who owned a grill near the hotel, and his girlfriend. And the girlfriend admitted that Jowers had come in all muddy with a rifle, and then disassembled the rifle right after. And he was clearly out in this grassy knoll area, and he ultimately admitted to participation, although it's not believed that he was the shooter. The shooter was likely a Memphis police officer who had been groomed for the task, or a CIA assassin. Another theory alleges that it's a guy named Moses Moscovichian, who was a CIA assassin who may have also been behind the murder of Dr. Frank Olson, a CIA whistleblower. And this was a huge coordinated operation, and James Earl Ray was set up as the patsy. And one of the best sources that Pepper located was a guy named Adkins, Ron Adkins, who is the son of a very prominent Memphis city official and Klansman. And Ron reported that his father, and as a boy, he was actually present in these meetings that included Clyde Tolson, the number two to J. Edgar Hoover in the FBI, was at these planning meetings. There was also an FBI informant and CIA informant named Merrill McCullough, an African American, who was at these meetings and who was implicated in the plot. But a key figure was Clyde Tolson, and he had a huge amount of money that he dispensed. And Adkins was involved in the planning, and it's a very elaborate plan. It may take me a bit of time to explain. If you want me to explain some of the core features and how they set up with Ray as the Patsy, I'll go into that.
One of the things
may take a little bit of time to go into some of the details.
Well, one of the things that really surprised me in reading your two articles again is that there's so many people involved in this. It's just a complicated strategy that they had, and then you also talked about how many people were murdered, the death toll of people who had witnessed the shooter or were involved in the case, how everyone turned up dead. There was so many.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and that's true also. The Kennedy assassination, there are many other people murdered in these elaborate conspiracies. Now, I'll try and summarize briefly some of the key points, and so people can follow at home. So the key part, I guess, two aspects. To first focus on Ray, because so they set him up as the Patsy. So Clyde, and this was planned over numerous years, and there were many meetings, and Ron Adkins was one of the people involved in the meeting. He was very close with Tolson. In fact, the son, Rod Adkins Jr., who spoke at length with Pepper, referred to Clyde Tolson as Uncle Clyde. So he was practically a member of the family. Now, the plan for Ray was as follows. Well, firstly, Ray, his background was in U.S. Army he served in the U.S. Army and Army some kind of secretive unit at the end of World War II. And this is a familiar pattern we've seen. We've discussed this on this show, that there's a familiar pattern where a lot of these patsies and Manchurian candidates have a military background, recruited from the military or CIA, intelligence agency. So Ray was in the Army. After World War II, his brother feels, and there are another good source is a book by Larry Ray, James O'Ray's brother, besides Pepper, and Pepper was in collaboration with his brother as well. He said that his brother was never the same after he was in the military. And there were some strange incidents he was involved in, and he may have been subjected to mind control experiments in the military, this being in the late 40s at the time MKUltra was developed. Then he became a petty criminal, and this is the perfect Patsy because he was in and out of jail. Nothing serious. He was not a violent felon, but he was involved in a lot of petty crime. And then he was incarcerated at Jefferson, Missouri penitentiary. And this is where the plan kicked in because the warden of that penitentiary and other prison officials had a background in military intelligence and intelligence agencies and were connected with the FBI, CIA. And Clyde Tolson allegedly paid the warden significant amount of money for a plan to have James Earl Ray escape from the Jefferson City prison in I believe it was in a bread truck. And that made him the perfect Patsy because then he was on the run. So his handlers controlled him every step of the way because, somebody who's escaped from prison is one step away from going back to prison. And he has no money. He has no source of income. So he has to listen to exactly, he had people helping him. They told him exactly where to go. He ultimately went to, and a strange thing here is he had all this money at his disposal. How's the guy who escaped from prison who has no job? Because he had a plastic surgery and he was even taking like dancing lessons, and he had somehow had a lot of money at his disposal.
Well, one thing One thing you said that I thought was really
Yeah,
interesting,
and it'll take me some time to cover the full story. So
one thing you said that I thought was really interesting in your article was you made the connection with MK Ultra and you and Cameron, and we discussed him in our last show on MK Ultra, and you had said that he had visited, Canada, and he had been subjected to hypnosis and all kinds of experiments
yes,
while he
because
was in Canada.
yeah, see, he made his handlers made he went up to Montreal. Somehow he got there after his escape, and then he met this shadowy figure named Raoul, who's looks like he's connected to intelligence agencies. And then, yes, he actually had a visit to the Allen Reddy Memorial, and he was subjected to that kind of hypnosis and mind control. And then they had him, go back down to Memphis and told him exactly what to do and where to be so they can set him up for the crime. But it was actually impossible for him to have carried out the shooting. Again, the shooting occurred from this grassy knoll and not from the rooming house. So there's no evidence that he was the actual shooter, but they framed him. And then, he did escape after the shooting, but eventually he was apprehended. And actually, they had him buy a ticket. He was apprehended in London, and he was supposed to be on his way to northern Rhodesia, southern Rhodesia, which was still, under white supremacist rule. Because one thing the CIA will do is they create a legend of somebody, a public persona, like Lee Harvey Oswald. They tried to have him identify as a left winger because they wanted to blame, communists for killing Kennedy and used that as a pretext to ramp up the Cold War. So they had him arrested as a member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in some kind of fight, when in fact Oswald was an infiltrator in that left-wing organization. In this case, the reason he had a ticket to southern Rhodesia, which was under the rule of the white supremacist Ian Smith government before it became Zimbabwe, was to play up this image of him as this white supremacist. And I think they paid off some prisoners to say, oh yeah, Ray was a racist, and we used to hear him watching TV and saying racist things. And then it was found out that prison didn't have TV until like 1970. So their stories were completely false. And actually, people who knew him said he was not a white supremacist at all. And there's no actual evidence of him being a white supremacist or having any animus toward Martin Luther King, just like with Lee Harvey Oswald had no animus toward John F. Kennedy, no reason to shoot him. In fact, Oswald liked Kennedy and I may have voted for him. So, so they create this false image of him as a white supremacist. And then when he was arrested, he was betrayed by his lawyers who told him to plead guilty, that it would save him the death penalty. And there were these authors who are in the pay of the FBI who are getting the official story and participate in the con job. Like they promised him money from a book deal. And anyway, he was conned into pleading guilty. And then later he tried to reverse his plea, but it was too late. So he really never got a trial. But anyway, all the evidence indicate that he was set up as the patsy. And the other diabolical aspect of the plot was that Atkins revealed is that they lured King to Memphis because they knew Memphis was a very favorable city for assassinating him because the mayor hated him. The head of the Memphis police force was a guy named Frank Holloman, who had actually worked for J. Edgar Hoover and was one of his deputies. And that ensured control over the Memphis police force who participated in the assassination. And the actual assassin is thought to be if either Moses Moscovichian or Frank Strausser, who was actually Pepper is pretty firm that it was Frank Strausser, a Memphis police officer, because there was a big shoe print found in the grassy knoll about
Size 13.
size 13. And he actually interviewed Strausser with lunch, and it was kind of like a friendly interview. He just tricked him. He's like, "Can I see your shoe? And what shoe size do you wear?" And he said, "Oh, I wear a size 13." And that was the shoe. And he was like training at a gun range. He was like training his sniping abilities in the weeks before at a local gun range, and people identified him. But they actually, the Clyde Tolson plot, they paid, they lured King to Memphis by actually provoking the garbage worker strike, because King came to Memphis to speak out against the ill treatment of the garbage workers in the city. And they had been on strike and they were demanding better wages, and King was there to support their strike. That strike was actually provoked in a diabolical way. Clyde Tolson paid some mafia elements to basically kidnap 2 garbage workers and throw them in the back of a garbage worker truck so they'd be killed by the truck, that sweeps up the garbage. And that was designed, but it was covered up as to how they were killed. The official story was that they were killed in an accident while working, and this exposed the bad conditions. But really, the mafia thugs murdered them, and that was all designed to lure King to Memphis, where there was favorable ground for killing him. And then there were 2 informants within his own inner circle, one believed to be Jesse Jackson, who had him shift rooms and told King to go outside on the porch to set him up to be killed from the grassy knoll. So there are many elements of this plot, and the Memphis Police Department played a key role. Frank Holloman, but ultimately it goes up to Clyde Tolson and Jay, who was working for J. Edgar Hoover, and they wanted King dead for a variety of reasons, but including what we discussed, how he spoke out against the Vietnam War. And he was building an interracial, as we've discussed on this show. What U.S. power elite does not want is an interracial movement of the working and middle class to challenge the corporate oligarchy and the warfare state. And that's precisely what King was doing. After 1964, with the success of the civil rights movement, he was using his stature to broaden his movement into a broader movement to change the U.S. political economy, to develop more socialistic economic program, and to rein in the warfare state. And he was such a magnetic speaker, and he can draw people of all races together, and that's what they don't want. So that's why they play the game today of divide and conquer and dividing people on race.
Yeah, I was, pretty horrified about a couple of things. They just crushed these. I mean, it's hideous. They crushed these sanitation workers.
Yeah.
To incite this whole, the calculations and the covert actions and the planning and plotting is so extraordinary in this case. I mean, they were so against Dr. Martin Luther King for his, beliefs and his ability to motivate people. It's just incredible. And they also did some horrible things to psych him out because he had an affair. They were sending him letters and saying to him, "Oh, if you don't kill yourself, we're going to ruin your image by saying you're having an affair. So we want you to kill yourself." I mean, it's just so diabolical that they were attacking him physically. They were also, I think, putting fire bombs in his house, right, Jeremy?
No, there was a long FBI campaign under the FBI's notorious Quentin operation to try and destroy King and to weaken and divide the civil rights groups. And that included efforts to try and get him to commit suicide and all kinds of things that they were doing preceding the assassination plot. But it should be noted that the mainstream histories, including academic historians, like there's a biography of J. Edgar Hoover by a Yale historian named Beverly Gage. She does address the COINTELPRO operations that Hoover adopted against King, but she's silent on the FBI's role in the King assassination, which William Pepper helped to expose. And William Pepper was subjected to vitriolic attack. Even in his obituary, he died this year, and the New York Times wrote this condescending obituary by Clay Risen Jr., the son of the well-known national security reporter James Risen, accusing Pepper of being a conspiracy theorist, saying he was a 9/11 truther, and he promoted all this misinformation. So there's this denial that the FBI and Hoover were involved in the assassination, and there's this attempt to malign Pepper and brand him as a conspiracy theorist, when, as the Barber film shows, he's probably among the greatest lawyers in American history, and he methodically put this case together. He tracked down witnesses incredibly to tell the story. And he did very, very thorough research. And one thing, he tracked down the son of one of the nurses, because part of the story he tells is that King wasn't dead. He was shot and he
Oh,
was
this is
very
horrible
badly
part.
wounded, but he possibly could have been saved by the doctors. But the doctors wanted him dead, and there was a doctor named Breen Bland who allegedly smothered him with a pillow instead of trying to save his life. And this was reported by a nurse, and the nurse told her son. She was scared at the time, but she told her son, and Pepper got in touch with her son. And actually, Ron Atkins corroborated the story. So there's at least two witnesses who've heard the story about Dr. Breen Bland, because he got everybody else out of the operating room and he smothered him with a pillow. And this nurse saw it as she was walking out of the room. And we have several corroborating sources about this. So, yeah, there's so many different intrigues. And Pepper was the one who tracked down these witnesses. And I mean, he was an amazing lawyer. And to have him smeared in the New York Times and ignored by this, exalted Yale professor, Beverly Gage, in her biography of Hoover, it's sad. And as a denial, we're having Martin Luther King, and there are going to be all these celebrations of his life, and including the alternative media. I'll bet you $1 million, and I'll be a rich man, that Democracy Now! Or these outlets will not bring up how the FBI was behind King's assassination or go into the details of this plot. And that's certainly true in the mainstream media. They leave this out of the history books, and most historians don't teach it in schools. They usually celebrate only King because the early part of his career where he fought for civil rights was certainly very noble, but the stuff you were quoting is usually neglected as well. But they don't go anywhere near the FBI's role in his assassination. They might touch on the FBI COINTELPRO, and they tried to get him to commit suicide, but they'll never address how the FBI had him murdered. The FBI director had him murdered, and that all these other people got killed. His brother got killed. I can't. It's all in my article.
A list. It's a list.
Max got killed.
Judges got killed.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned about the heart attack gun. And I think 2 justices died of heart attacks. People were just dying of heart attacks left and right.
Yeah, and his brother, they claim he drowned when he was like an outstanding swimmer. And people in his family said there's no way he would have drowned.
And he was like naked and just in his underwear. No, he wouldn't go swimming like that. I mean, it's just,
Because they knew the truth, and it got hidden for so many years, and it would have been lost to history if not for William Pepper. So William Pepper is an American hero. And this Martin Luther King Day, he should be celebrated alongside Martin Luther King. And students should learn about William Pepper. And he's a great role model for young people, that we need more William Peppers, a real crusading lawyer who will search for the truth and real justice.
You had a couple of quotes as to how he was harassed, and I think they're worth reading. You basically went into, according to Barber, Mike Wallace of CBS's 60 Minutes called him a national traitor. So here's a man exposing the truth of an assassination and how our government is not even complicit. Our government arranged it. Is the perpetrator of this hideous violence, and the person who exposes it is the national traitor, not our government for betraying our trust in it.
Exactly.
So I think that's pretty horrible.
Yes, and the traitor is J. Edgar Hoover, Clyde Tolson, and the patriot is Martin Luther King and William Pepper.
And then you also had a quote from Bill Atwood, and he wanted to run Pepper's Ramparts piece on Vietnam. He received a visit from Averell Harriman, and you should talk a little bit about Averell Harriman. I know he comes up often. President Johnson's envoy, who told him never to publish anything that Bill Pepper wrote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is the kind of blacklisting we see and corruption of the media. and it's supposed to be a free media, but here's a high-level government representative threatening. I think this was Look magazine, which was a very prominent magazine at that
Yes.
time. And Bill Atwood was a good journalist and editor, and he was excited to run the story. And then he's threatened by the government. And Harriman was a hatchet man of Lyndon Johnson. And this is what you would find in an authoritarian state, and what we're supposed to love about. I mean, it is great about America that we're supposed to have the right to free press in our Constitution, and the right to free speech. But this is reminiscent of an authoritarian state, and what we criticize and justify, a regime change operation, because we claim these governments in Russia and China do that, and they may in Russia and China, but we do it here too. And Harriman was the mentor of Joe Biden, so in the U.S. Senate, he was a very influential figure in the U.S. government for many years. So this is a blatant case of government intimidation.
And it's also our favorite word, impunity. None of these people were held accountable and paid any debt to society.
Exactly.
Well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Left on Left. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like, donate, and share our broadcast. Your kind support, I can't speak. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Oh boy, that was my fault. My camera died. I was trying to fix it and I lost track of time.
Oh, so it went over?
We went way over.
I thought it was a little long.
Yeah, I was like, wait, when is this going to
Well,
wrap up?
can we include some of that material in the second segment? Because
I might move it.
Yes.
I might have to move it.
How much over did we go?
About 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. So let's do this segment 5 minutes less.
Grab a glass of water before we do the next segment.
All right,
Still try to stick to the right time, because I always cut.
Well, we had a lot of good material in there.
I'm not going to cut any of it. If I need to, I'll move it. But
yeah, move it. So let's just do this one 19 minutes.
Well, it'll still be fine if we get close to 24. Don't worry, I'll make sure it's there. Because I think I can take one of the questions that Gloria asked and then your answer to it and take that as a chunk and then move that as a chunk. But I don't know exactly how long it's going to be. So let's still try to get close to the 24, but we'll just make sure we wrap it up a little bit as close as we can.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, we covered a lot in the first episode. So
yeah, I'm not quite sure. We didn't really break them up too cleanly. I can read a little bit more of Dr. King. It's hard not to cry when I read him. I really, yeah. I'm so influenced by his words and inspired by his words. It was amazing man.
Yeah, I mean, they killed all of the great leaders we had in this country. And now we're left with what we have now. That's just the way it is. Unless we do something about it. All right. Are you ready? We're going to try to stick as close to the time.
Yeah.
As possible.
All right. Yeah. I mean,
we can always yap over, more than we need to.
Well, we've got more, so I'm probably going to have to take about 2 or 3 minutes from the previous one.
Well, but we had a lot of good material, and now we may be repeating. So that's why I say, why don't we do a few minutes less for this segment?
Well, yeah, we will do less. I'm sure we will, because just when it's time, we'll when you see the wrap up thing, that's when we got to just finish your thought, do the closer, and then we'll get out of here.
Okay, Gloria, one thing you can ask is about Jesse Jackson and the.
I was going to, but you were a runaway train. I didn't want to stop you.
Yeah, well, in this segment.
Yeah, I will. It was heartbreaking for me to find that out. It really was.
All right, let's get to it. I'm going to drop out. Gloria, you start when you're ready. Oh, wait. My phone died. Okay, there we go. Okay, start when we're ready.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Left on Left, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. I'm Gloria Guillo, a former administrator in New York City government, an investigative journalist, vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, a group so left it's right on. I'm joined here today by a resident expert, Jayme Kuzmarov. Jayme is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are our own and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. We have a disclaimer. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional advice. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and form their own opinions. This presentation is not intended to incite, promote, or encourage any discriminatory or illegal activity. Our topic today is part 2 in a two-part series. Did J. Edgar Hoover coordinate the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and was James Earl Ray a patsy? So we covered quite a bit in our first show, and I'd just like to read a little bit more about Dr. Martin Luther King's excerpts from a speech he gave at the Riverside Church on April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year before he was assassinated. We're recognizing also not just the assassination of our beloved Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was born on January 15th, but also
Martin Luther King Day on Monday. So
yeah, very great. Thank you. So we're ahead. We're actually ahead. Thank you, Jayme. So I just want to read: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this is from Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence. And he delivered this at the Riverside Church in Harlem. I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. This way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, or filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, or injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of people normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically damaged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world. Take it away, Jayme.
well, there's nothing more I can say. King's words are very eloquent and beautiful, and as you point out, a lot of his insights, unfortunately, are applicable to the modern day world. And one thing I remember he said, we learn to fly the air like birds, but we can't live as brothers and sisters. And I mean, our technology is so advanced, but that technology is just used for more and more killing. And we haven't really, learned how to live with one another, whether in the United States or around the world, where the U.S. goes about bombing so many countries or supplying the weapons to foment conflicts. So, I mean, we need a king-like figure today. And, he was bringing people together in his last years of all races in an interracial movement. And that really threatened the power elite because that really what they fear, black and white coming together along class line to challenge the criminal oligarchy that runs the United States and foments violence around the world. and they knew his magnetism as a speaker and as a great leader, and that's why they had to murder him. And the evidence that William Pepper assembled is irrefutable, makes it very, very clear that the FBI coordinated his assassination, and that the key figure behind that was J. Edgar Hoover, and the key planner was Clyde Tolson, his number two man. And we know that from the testimony that Pepper garnered from Ron Adkins Jr., who was the son of a Memphis city official and Klansman who was involved, and a city leader who was involved in the planning with Clyde Tolson, along with an FBI informant named Merrill McCullough, who went on to work for the CIA in the dirty wars in Central America in the 1980s. These were among the key planners, and a key figure was Lloyd Jowers, who owned the Jim's Grill. He admitted to his role, so we actually know, this is true because Pepper coordinated a citizen's trial, and I believe it was televised. And Lloyd Jowers admitted to his guilt, and he was worried about going to jail for life. He was getting older at that time, and he confessed to his role. He was not the trigger man, but he helped the assassin, who was believed to be a Memphis police officer named Frank Strausser, or alternatively, there was a CIA assassin who may have been present, or they usually have several shooters, and one was a guy named Moses Moscovichian, who is believed also to have been behind the CIA's murder of Dr. Frank Olson. And this was an elaborate plot, but we have to thank, most of the public doesn't know about it, but some people do. It is not lost to history thanks to the efforts of William Pepper, and the evidence is available. I urge viewers to read his 3 books. Pepper wrote 3 books on this assassination, and there's also a new documentary by John Barber about William Pepper's life, and that presents some of the key evidence he uncovered in his dogged investigations over 30 years.
Yeah, you wanted to talk a little bit about in this particular episode. Well, I did want to also reread the Stokely Carmichael's statement that you have in your article. And Jayme, if you'd want to put up Jeremy's articles, that'd be great.
And I can add that you should also read Larry Ray's book, which goes well with Pepper's work. Larry Ray was the brother of James Earl Ray, and he wrote a book that provides a lot of detail about how his brother was set up as a patsy and the misinformation that was advanced about his brother. Not to say that the guy, he was a saint, but he was not a white supremacist. He was not a violent person. And he was there's very, very strong evidence that he was set up. And Larry Ray is a very honest book. And Larry Ray was put in prison on trumped up charges because of what he knew about his brother. And he unjustly served about 20 years of his life in prison.
So for our listeners, the articles that Jeremy wrote that we're discussing today, one is J. Edgar Hoover, a coordinated assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and James Earl Ray was a patsy. And that was published on September 23rd, 2024. And also an article that Jeremy wrote back on January 17th, 2022, did J. Edgar Hoover order the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.? So these are 2 great articles that are really packed with whodunit, and there's so many people involved. It's almost hard to keep it straight, and they had such an incredible network because they really feared Dr. Martin Luther King. And I think it's really summed up by a quote in one of Jeremy's articles, which is by Stokely Carmichael. And this was what he whispered to Dr. King after he gave his speech at the church in Harlem. He said, the man doesn't care you call ghettos concentration camps, but when you tell him his war machine is nothing but hired killers, you got trouble. And it's this that made them all gang up on him, because the threat is just horrific. And they also, and Jeremy wanted to speak about this, wanted to talk about the role of Jesse Jackson in this, which is really heartbreaking. His role is it's an alleged role, right, Jeremy? We don't have
yeah, it looks very bad on Jesse Jackson's part. Even his behavior was very odd after he went right on TV, and because he wanted to be the heir apparent to Martin Luther King, and that may have been his motive. And he went on TV after, and he was kind of like grandstanding himself, and he showed like his own narcissism right after. And there was an informant within King's camp who gave the information of his room, and urged the switch of his room, and then got King to go out on the porch to be in a position at a certain time where he could be easy prey to the snipers. And it's believed that that informant was Jesse Jackson. And his behavior after, like he left immediately Memphis, and he went right on TV, and he was even still wearing the same clothes. And he was just out to get more publicity for himself. And he's proven to be, there's a lot of corruption involving his family and his son. So I think my impression of him is not a very good one.
Well, allegedly, he told Dr. King to wear a tie so that it would be easy to distinguish him from the other people on the balcony.
Yeah, and I think Pepper's research pointed out to Jackson as
the informant.
Rat. Yeah.
It's really heartbreaking, because I've been to, marches and events with Jesse Jackson, and I always held him in very high esteem. And this, really hurt to believe that this could be possible. But the CIA and the deep state, they infiltrate everything, and it's hideous.
Yeah, and one of the infiltrators in the black groups was named Merrill McCullough. His daughter tried to write a kind of defense of his. There's a book published by her daughter, because I was excited. I saw his daughter. I saw this book was available by the daughter, Merrill McCullough, and I thought it would be like her anguished coming to terms with her father was an FBI informant who was complicit in the King killing. But it's just like she tried to defend her father and claim he wasn't responsible. But Pepper's research and others have pointed to him as an FBI, CIA infiltrator in a local Black Power group in Memphis, and he was involved in some of the coordination. And they needed these insiders to get access to King and to influence him in certain ways. And McCullough went on to work in a Phoenix-type assassination program in Central America. So, and I think he became an alcoholic, or maybe another person. But these kind of informants, ultimately, they're very troubled people. They have a hard time later in life coming to terms with a terrible sellout and betrayal of their own people, and they totally lose their souls, and a lot of them become alcoholics.
And we see this infiltration everywhere. We see it in the what are they, the white groups, like the white, give me some of those groups, like the Proud Boys.
We see in the media. I mean, as far as just the coverage of this case up to today, the media is still suppressing the truth. They're attacking William Pepper as a conspiracy theorist, and they're not even, like, this obituary in the New York Times. It didn't present any of the evidence and the amazing research and how Pepper came to his conclusion. I mean, I'm trained as a researcher to assess a book or a work by looking at the sources and looking at his methodology. How did he find this information? Are they credible sources? And you find in his case, yes, that a lot of it is just corroborated by other sources, corroborating what others said, other evidence, people who are directly involved in the plot admitting it, people presenting detail that only they would know and that are backed up by other research. So, as a professional researcher, I can say this is impressive. Yes, there are a few things maybe that are still speculative, But this is really impressive how he went about this and how he developed the theory that he did. But instead, when you pick up the New York Times, he's slandered as this conspiracy theorist, and so the average person who may not have delved into the case or read any of the books just read that risen obituary and said, "Oh, this guy's a crackpot," and that's a way to suppress what he uncovered. And it's about the corruption of our government and our governing institutions. And I mean, the FBI, with impunity, Hoover and his associates got away with this, and they still get away with doing abhorrent things until they're held accountable. They'll continue to abuse their power, and the FBI will not be what it was set up to be, a policing agency to protect national security, not to violate the laws and kill social movement leaders. That's not what the FBI was set up for.
The point I'm trying to make that I don't think I made very well is just that, this kind of infiltration, this kind of attention is not just to Black groups, it's to white groups. And, with this alleged kidnapping of Governor Whitmore, I mean, how many FBI and agents were in that one, Jeremy? Do you recall?
See, they continue to do this, and the FBI are smart. In those days, the threat came from the left. Now the right is stronger. The left was destroyed. I mean, COINTELPRO, the murder of King, they destroyed the left-wing movement in America. There's no left, as we discussed on this show. The right is much stronger and has grown strong, so they're going to try and manipulate that to their own purposes. And their main purpose is to divide and conquer, and to boost their own power, bureaucracy, and funding. So they infiltrate right-wing groups to stir up violent incidents so they can get more funding, and they can keep the public on edge and sign off on a growing police state. So they've infiltrated. They did what they were doing in King's Circle with Proud Boys, and with this plot on the Michigan governor was an FBI plot to make it look like these white supremacists wanted to kill the Michigan governor. And the general strategy is because they look for new threats to national security. So for years it was the threat of Islamic terrorism, but when that recedes, that's when they wanted to play up the threat of domestic violence extremism. So they infiltrated the Proud Boys, helped trigger the January 6th riot, triggered that Michigan governor's plot, and then the public is on edge about domestic violence extremism. And there's some FBI whistleblowers who testified about that at a congressional hearing about a year and a half ago now, and they discussed how the FBI was inflating the statistics and manipulating public opinion about this threat of domestic violence extremism, and the purpose was to get more funding for the FBI.
And we also know environmental groups are always infiltrated. So this is, everybody is infiltrated.
Yeah.
And
the left groups are still infiltrated. We had an event with Covert Action magazine, and an FBI agent, former agent Colleen Rowley, said she was involved in a local peace group, and it was just like a bunch of grandmothers, women in their 70s and 80s, who wanted peace in the world and got together once a week and had some community events, and they were infiltrated. And the leader, it was like 100. She said the leader was 100 years old, and they were. She was on the FBI hit list, as if she's some national security threat. A 100-year-old woman who just wants peace in the world is a national security threat somehow. And this is the abuse of the FBI. They infiltrate even small media outlets. Any alternative media outlet gets infiltrated. Peace groups, and it destroys all political life. I mean, and they try and weaken those groups. One of their strategies is just to make sure the group is weak or ineffective, or they try and sow divisions so the group breaks up. But I mean, peace groups, that's vital to democracy. Look at our runaway warfare state, and that is a good sign of democracy, that people are actually getting together, whether old or young people, to lobby for something good for society, and yet they're viewed as a threat. So.
Yeah, it's pretty sad when peace is, what the government is afraid of.
Exactly. And it shows this runaway police state. And that's not what and it goes back to the King assassination. With impunity, they got away with it. The The perpetrator of COINTELPRO and the King assassination were never prosecuted, and so the same methods get adopted over and over, year after year, and nobody ever faces consequences for repeated illegal activity. And the people ultimately suffer, the American public, because we don't have a credible national police force that's actually looking out for national security. And Colleen Rowley testified, I mean, when you needed a good police force, like 9/11, she testified how they suppressed reports. There were reports about plots and terror attacks, and the Minneapolis office, like, she filed a report and it got suppressed by higher ups. So when it, and that's the job of the FBI, is to thwart any real, terrorist threats or national security threats, and they're not doing their job in that area, and instead they're infiltrating progressive groups or any political group, and that's undermining democracy. So something has gone seriously wrong here, and we need a major reform movement to root out the corrupt people and restore integrity to the FBI, or establish a new police. Maybe that the current FBI and CIA are just irredeemable. They should be abolished and new agencies set up that are committed to the legitimate goals of policing, things like sex trafficking, what the FBI does, is legitimate in doing, or legitimate national security threats and legitimate policing activities.
I just wanted to bring it a little bit back to Dr. King, and I just wanted to say what we're saying about his assassination is not an allegation. In 1999, a mixed-race jury presiding over a wrongful death civil suit by the King family in Memphis reached a unanimous verdict that King was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy involving the U.S. government.
Exactly. The evidence of Pepper is incredibly strong, and that's why this labeling him in the New York Times as a conspiracy theorist, and Yale historian who leave that out of their histories of the FBI, have done a gross disservice to the public and have committed basically journalistic and academic malpractice, because the evidence is hard evidence, including admissions, from people who were involved, like Lloyd Jowers, openly admitted to his role in the assassination. So, I mean, at a trial, that's crucial evidence. When people confess to a crime, that's taken very seriously by police and by a jury in criminal cases, as it should be. And there are other corroborating witnesses as well, and there are just many witnesses. The Pepper book has brought forward many witnesses, and Ron Atkins is a very significant witness who was able to corroborate a lot of what he was saying, with evidence, hard evidence, and facts. So, this is a very, very strong case. This is not a conspiracy at all. That term is simply not used appropriately.
And in this case, it was a conspiracy. The U.S. government conspired to murder him.
Yeah, the people who are proving a conspiracy are not conspiracy theorists. They're people proving a conspiracy by the conspirators, J. Edgar Hoover and the U.S. government. And conspiracies occur repeatedly throughout history. I mean, I'm a historian, so that's something I study, whether it's in the plot to assassinate the Archduke Ferdinand and go to World War I. I mean, there were Europeans involved. There was a conspiracy. It was not just a lone assassin, this Gavrilo Princip. You think a 19-year-old kid can pull off assassinating the Archduke, just going up to his car and shooting him? This was a coordinated plot funded by, in that case, the Russian government, and intelligence services were behind that. These acts occur in history, and it's never a lone person can't do that. They require major financing and protection and support. So the real conspiracy theorists are people like James Risen and people who deceive the public. It's ridiculous, and people it's a new McCarthyism to attack good people as conspiracy theorists and investigators, and it's antithetical to our profession as journalists and historians. And we have to call out these disgraces like Clay Risen and not tolerate that any longer. And hopefully our show will contribute to that people call out these modern day McCarthyites.
Well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Left on Left. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like, donate, and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week.
All right.
Here we go.
Hopefully somebody's listening to us. And somebody will protest that jackass Clay Risen Jr. and all these people who promote that garbage, calling William Pepper a conspiracy theorist and others who do that, because I'm tired of that, and we shouldn't put up with this modern day McCarthyism.
I don't see it stopping anytime soon.
Well,
I think we're all tired.
Organize and start hounding these people, and then they'll start to face some pressure.
Well,
and that's what's needed. It's been done before. The McCarthy people said enough is enough. We're tired of this. These are not communist agents. They're regular people who want a more decent policy. And they said, goodbye, McCarthy. And he got gone, and all the people like him were discredited. So,
well, I mean, we have seen some things change. I mean, even recently in the last years or so, I think the Trump vote was the vote for his reelection was kind of a referendum on the way Democrats have been running things, and people are just tired of a lot of the censorship.
There's a lot of people tired of that. And
that
kind of mentality. And these magazines have lost their credibility, whether the New York Times, whether it's mainstream academia. So, yeah.
I have to be cynical here, gentlemen. They end this stuff when it's convenient to end it. I mean, they destroyed Gaza, destroyed the Palestinian people, and now they're ready to have a ceasefire. Even the word ceasefire is a joke. I mean, this was an extermination campaign.
If they even go through with it,
it was an extermination campaign, a ceasefire. I mean, this is
ceasefire is ridiculous. It's just you need to stop killing these people. I mean, that's what it is. This is a stop the genocide.
Well, I got to run, guys. So great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jayme, for organizing this. And I guess next week we have a guest, Stan Smith. So I'll email you early in the week so you can email him maybe on Wednesday.
All right.
Okay.
I think we can take care of that. So I've got some editing work to do because I goofed on that first part. I was not on the clock. So my camera just died in the middle of it, and I'm sure.
I got to run, guys. So see you soon.
See you later, Jayme.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. So I guess we can run because I know I've got a lot of stuff.
I got to go to the hospital.
All right. Well, we've all got stuff we got to take care of.
I know, it's crazy.
2025 did not get the memo that 2024 was over.
No, it's running hard. But we're here.
All right. Well, everybody,
we love you guys. So keep watching.
Thanks for watching these us record these episodes live. Maybe some people would probably enjoy watching me try to edit it because that's going to be a nightmare. All right. We'll see you next week. And like Jayme said, we're going to have a guest next week. So it'll be a little bit more than usual. But we'll be back to record more episodes for the radio. And I hope you enjoyed watching it. I like this. I like the behind the scenes stuff. So I know there's other people out there who like it too. So we'll see you next time. And have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.